Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Scaling Up Growth Strategies. At the end of this chapter, I'd like to go into some very generic growth strategies in order to understand how we can apply them also to startup, into the startup world, basically. First of all, we start with Ansaf. Ansaf identified 4 strategic options to scale up. And this is interesting for startups on the one hand, because what we normally say is startups, with their disruptive innovations, they come into the world from that diversification part, from creating new markets with new products, and by that being very dangerous to existing companies. However, then we have to change the perspective, and if we look at the other 3 fields, we can see that these are the basic fields which you also as a startup should use in order to grow your company. So what you do is you start with something like this, with an Apple iPhone. Let's take this example. But then you try to sell more and more iPhones to more and more people in the US. You try to go abroad and sell them also to Europe and India and so on. And you develop the iPad in order to sell more products to your old market. And these are the 3 interesting fields which you like to cover as a startup when you stepped into the world with your new company, with your new product, in order to be able to scale up. So the 3 questions which you should ask yourself is: how can I penetrate the market more? How can I develop a new market by market development? And what are the interesting new products which I should develop for my old market? And this is actually what I like to go through and start with the first one, the market penetration. Market penetration is being done in 4 ways. This is actually adapted from the book from Eric Ries on Lean Startup. And it is said there that the first way is the so-called word of mouth. So you use your existing customers to tell others about your company. So to some extent you go viral there, but it's not really viral, but you do have happy customers, and these happy customers, they tell others, oh, I've bought this at that company, or I'm having that kind of like device, and others see that and want the same. So you tell others. Secondly, a side effect of product usage. People are wearing fancy clothes, for example. Others people see that and like to have that clothes too. So they see it in the street and say, oh, I need to buy that. And they see the brand name over here. This is how you can start selling more and more fashion. The third way is through funded advertising. So you really try to buy new customers. You sell to new customers because you have channels where you can get new customers. This is what you do in the internet with AdWords, and you can even go into, if you're a more known company, to TV and so on. And the 4th way is via repetitive purchase or use. So customers are coming to your site again in order to buy the next generation of products or whatever. And this leads to the 3 engines of growth Ries identified. The first one being the sticky engine of growth. The sticky engine of growth is actually the one which should make the customer more sticky to you. So the customer sticks to you. The most important measure is the fluctuation ratio. So you'd love to have low fluctuation, and you're growing because new customers get to your site, but not too many customers go away. You can do that by attracting customers and retaining them with a long-term perspective by using the business model design theme of customer lock-in. And Apple does that, for example. So you focus on existing customers first, and you try to make them come again and come, like, stick to you. That's the sticky engine of growth. So the second one is the viral engine of growth. So people are talking about you, talking, and try to use word of mouth in order to have more and more customers. So customers themselves take the main role in marketing. Key figure is the viral coefficient. A good example is the Dollar Shave Club. This guy was selling razors for $1, and he only had those YouTube videos where he showed the customer that he can sell razors for $1, and customers started talking about that, and more customers came because other customers were talking about that. That was typically going viral. So you focus on maximizing the viral coefficient. I think every company tries to do some kind of that. And the third one is the paid engine of growth. The paid engine of growth is you acquire new customers through direct investments, for example, into AdWords or using a sales force, where you maximize the revenue per customer by and at the same time minimizing the expenses for customers. So you try to understand the customer value versus the customer acquisition cost further, and try to balance those two by paying for the right ways of advertising your product. There you focus on marginal profit. So as I said before, the lifetime value versus the acquisition cost, or the cost per acquisition, CPA in that case. These are the three engines of growth Eric Ries identified, and this is how you can try to penetrate your market. That's the first way of growing your company, with the help of the structure Ansoff gave us. The second way of doing that is market development. So the question, not only internationalization, but mainly stepping out of your niche. Because you as a startup normally should start with a very, very focused niche, with a focused, well-defined problem statement you're solving, and the vision which you're having to step out of that niche into the total industry. So this is actually where you are going, from the niche into the total industry, trying to take over more and more and more. So you offer a small service, you make it very sticky for your customers, and then expand to a big service out of that. When Amazon started to offer books, and now say they're selling everything, and there's no reason to go to any other website in the internet than Amazon, because you can buy everything. I mean, I'm not advertising Amazon. I'm just saying from a standpoint of business administration that this makes a lot of sense. And this is actually the question you're asking yourself. And how do you do that? Well, you can, on the one hand, and you saw it over here, by cost leadership or quality leadership. So on the one hand, you try to be the cost leader. So you work on your cost structure and try to be cheaper and cheaper, and getting the same revenues. And by being the cheapest on the market, people go to your place, and you get the mass where you also market your products. Or you can differentiate. And differentiation might not only be quality, it might be different aspects that help you to differentiate. However, in the entire market, like a Mercedes, which is still known for a high quality and high safety of their cars. So differentiation based on novel products or on novel customer relationships, more in the one-to-one marketing, getting there. In most cases, companies will more away do that, and there's only a couple companies who can go for cost leadership. As you can see here, if you use Porter's framework from competitive strategies, target market, competitive advantage, target market broad and narrow, and competitive advantage, low cost or differentiation. You see that again. Google is probably still in the low-cost leadership strategy. I mean, it's a sponsored business model. The business model design team is sponsor-based. You go to Google, you don't pay. Others pay for your usage, and this gives them a very unique position. However, if you look at companies in general, they start from an angle and they try to step out by being broader afterwards. If you look at Netflix, they have a very focused low-cost strategy. However, it's still narrow since they focus on a specific customer group and not on the broad mass of people. So for Netflix, they could step out there some kind of niche. I mean, they try to get more and more customers. However, it's still a very narrowly defined product. But if they start making movies, for example, for movie theaters, they would step out of that. And I think they started with that. And this is actually a way of stepping out of the small and narrow target market to find a broader niche. However, if you do that, you first of all work on your differentiation. And that's important. You try to understand what differs me to all the other competitors. What's the difference between Netflix and Amazon Prime? And the main task for Netflix is to especially work on that in order to be able to get broader. Because if you do not have a value proposition in the broader market compared, for example, to Amazon Prime, you won't have a chance. So first of all, you work on the differentiation and then you try to be broad. This is the way Netflix could go. Same for Tesla. Tesla started in a very niche, focused differentiation strategy, but now having more and more products there, they try to step out in the broad market. And this is actually the way to go. So it's important if you are in the niche and would like to develop your market further, try to understand your differentiation first before you go broad. And we talk about that in the next chapter because it's also about crossing the chasm. Why is this interesting? Because it could give you the chance to be a unicorn. This is what many companies are looking for, but how could you get a unicorn? Well, actually, you should have, and this is most important, an impact on the value chain of customer behavior. So a high impact. Customers should say, I would like to use your service. And this is what they, for example, do when they look at Uber. I mean, Uber is blocked in some countries of the world. And if you, as a US person, go over to Germany, you ask yourself, why can't I use Uber? And I mean, I do Uber in the US and I don't in Germany because it's not existing, but that's a good question. And this shows impact on the customer behavior. However, on the other hand, your product innovativeness has to be high enough that you're safe, that not all the competitors could step in there. Either you do it via lock-in, or you do have products that are so innovative or so unique, like Apple products, that not everyone can copy that. I mean, people can copy the smartphones, but people don't copy the Apple world. This is what didn't happen so far, and this is why they are in this interesting unicorn venture capital area where everyone likes to be in. I mean, how do you do that from the product development side? Well, if you are a startup, you know how to develop your product. You do it by bringing an MVP on the market, and then the next MVP after you evaluate it, and you test again, the next prototype, and so on. So what you do is, and you can see it here, you always do new MVPs, new testings, new going into market, and this is the way to step into markets because you have to learn from the market. The MVP mostly helps you to learn from your market because you are in that kind of cloud where you don't know what the future might bring you. So you create your future by building your product. However, if you have more knowledge, and this is the difference between, again, effectuation and causation, you should be more causal. if you know where to go, and an Apple nowadays knows where to go. They didn't know when they started with the first iPod. I mean, maybe Steve Jobs was visionary enough to know, but normally they didn't. So they gave it a try. They gave it a try in some way like that, but now they know what the market wants, and then you do your product development in a different way, because you can get there actually by evaluating, prototyping, redesigning stepwise, and then you can launch your product within a process, within a planned process. And that process should be a lot faster than the process you've seen before, based on the right knowledge. I'm always saying right knowledge. If you do not have the right knowledge, you might step back to the left side, where you are in the cloud of not knowing what the future will bring you. But if you do have the knowledge, go to the right side. And this is an advantage. This is also a difference between startup and established company, or a company that establishes on the market, which could also be yours as a startup. What is helpful there? Well, there are two aspects adding to that, and then I'm done with that chapter. So first of all, if you look into B2B settings, there's a good article by Fang et al. And they looked at actually customer participation in new product development. And they said customer participation helps you in two ways. First of all, helps you in the process, because you can share more information, you coordinate more effectively, and by that you can create a higher value because you know what the customer wants. That's the one thing. The other thing is, or the other aspect is, you do more customer relationship specific investments and supplier relationship specific investments. So the NPD investments are more specific, and your cost structure is a little better. If you look at an example from Germany, it's a street scooter. And the street scooter was a project from our university building an electronic car, which was developed with Deutsche Post, DHL, and you can see it worldwide, driving around now, these electronic cars. And they started very early on to work with Deutsche Post or with DHL to develop that car by sharing the information and also doing customer relationship specific investment, leading actually to the fact that DHL bought the entire company. They wanted to keep that on their own. So this is a way in the B2B settings to be better in new product development. What about B2C settings? Well, B2C settings, there's the role of social media. How companies use social media. And in actually overall 10% of the cases, they try to identify new products or new service opportunities. So they play with social media in order to find new products. Why is it helpful? It is especially helpful for startups, because startups know a lot better how to play social media, so how to work with blogs, how to work with social networking sites, or the virtual world. You can see lots of examples here. Also in collaboration products, in content communities, or so-called innovation hubs. And this is actually an advantage for startups right now. So what you can do as a startup, and that's interesting, you can use your initial capabilities that brought you to the market, that helped you going viral, also to help you grow. And this in general is actually the next step into growing your business. Based on the business model and based on the 3 areas of value, we analyzed how you could step into a business model innovation, innovate the various levels of value, and by that, growing your company.